The day my father asked me to share his bed to fill the emptiness was the day I realized grief could rot a person's soul. Hello, beautiful souls. I am Laura, a 28-year-old woman from Michigan, and if you are new here, welcome. To those who have been with me, thank you. Your support fuels this channel. If you have not subscribed yet, I cannot wait for you to join this family. Please share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Now, let me take you back to the storm that changed everything. 3 weeks after my mother's funeral, my father, David, called me to his dimly lit living room. His hands shook as he poured whiskey into a glass. I thought he wanted to cry together, to remember her laugh, her warmth. Instead, he said, "Laura, I cannot sleep alone anymore. You look so much like her. Would you stay with me? Not as my daughter, as her." The air turned thick. My skin prickled. This was not my stoic, loving father. Grief had clawed open a hole in him, and now he wanted me to crawl inside. I stood up, my legs trembling. "You are not well," I whispered. He reached for my hand, but I fled. That night, I drove to my best friend Sam's apartment. Sam had known our family for years. She brought casseroles after Mom's death, held me as I sobbed. But when I told her what David asked, her face paled. She stammered, "Maybe he just needs help." Her awkwardness fell off. I did not know then that Sam was hiding a secret that would split my world open. By morning, I decided to move in with David temporarily, to help him heal. But the real reason? I needed to know why he had asked me instead of turning to someone else. What I found in his house would unravel every truth I thought I knew. The walls of my childhood home whispered lies. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. I moved into my father's house, telling myself it was to heal him. But truthfully, I needed answers. Why had he asked me to replace my mother? His eyes followed me everywhere, heavy with a hunger I did not recognize. He began staying out late, claiming he was walking to clear his mind. Yet his clothes carried traces of vanilla perfume, my mother's favorite scent, but she was gone. Sam stopped answering my calls. When I showed up at her apartment, her hands trembled as she offered me tea. Her smile was too tight, her hugs too quick. "How is your dad?" she asked, staring at the floor. I told her he was struggling. She nodded, her voice brittle. Grief makes people do strange things. One icy Michigan night, I found my father's phone glowing on the kitchen counter. A text lit up the screen. "I miss you already. Tomorrow?" The sender's name was S. My stomach turned. I scrolled up, photos of Sam in a lace dress he had bought her, dates at the diner where my mother used to waitress. The dates started 2 weeks after the funeral. I drove to Sam's workplace, a small bookstore downtown. Through the fogged window, I saw them. My father's hand brushed her waist as she laughed, her head tilting the way mine did when I was nervous. They looked like lovers, not friends. Sam reached into her purse and pulled out my mother's pearl necklace, the one I had buried with her. The world tilted. I stumbled back, tears freezing on my cheeks. Sam had helped me pick out my mother's coffin. She had held my hand at the grave. Now she was wearing her jewelry, touching her husband. That night, I sat in my car outside the house, screaming until my throat burned. The man I called Dad was a stranger. The friend I called sister was a thief. Grief does not rot just souls. It poisons memories, too. The truth is a blade, and I wielded it without mercy. I waited for my father in the living room, my mother's favorite quilt draped over my knees. The clock ticked louder with every passing minute. When he walked in, smelling of winter and Sam's vanilla perfume, I held up his phone, the texts glowing like poison. "Explain this," I said. His face crumpled. He did not deny it. Instead, he sank into the armchair, his voice hollow. Your mother was sick for years. Sam was there. I was lonely. The words slithered between us. I wanted to scream. Loneliness did not excuse betrayal. You started this before she died, I hissed, my hands shaking. You let Sam comfort me while she was stealing you. He looked away, his silence a confession. I threw the phone at him. It clattered against the wall. You do not get to use grief as an excuse. That night, I found Sam at the bookstore, stacking shelves with trembling hands. She froze when she saw me. Laura, I can explain. You wore her necklace. I cut in, my voice icy. You touched her husband. Was any of our friendship real? Sam's eyes filled with tears. I loved your mother too. But your dad, he was broken. I wanted to fix him. Fix him? I laughed, sharp and bitter. You are not a saint. You are a liar. She reached for my arm. Please, I never meant to hurt you. I jerked away. The necklace around her throat gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Without thinking, I grabbed it. The pearls scattered like broken promises across the floor. Sam gasped, clutching her neck. You do not understand. He said he loved me. The words hung in the air, sharp and ugly. I stepped back, my rage cooling into something darker. You both deserve each other. As I left, the winter wind bit my face, but I welcomed it. Some fires burn cleaner in the cold. Betrayal is a disease, and I became its carrier. The weeks after the confrontation were a blur of sleepless nights and simmering rage. My father moved out, leaving the house haunted by my mother's ghost. Sam vanished from town. Her bookstore shuttered with a sign reading, "Closed indefinitely." But the silence was worse than the screaming. I filled it with vodka and the numbing glow of my phone screen. One Friday night, I wandered into a bar near the lake, the kind where the lights are dim enough to hide shame. That was where I saw Jake, Sam's husband. He sat alone, staring into a beer, his wedding band glinting under the bar lights. I had met him years ago at a backyard barbecue, quiet, kind, the sort of man who brought flowers to every party. Now he was just another casualty of Sam's lies. I slid onto the stool beside him. He did not recognize me at first. When he did, his eyes softened. Laura, I heard about your dad. The pity in his voice made my skin crawl. Sam did not tell you the whole story, did she? I said, leaning closer. He stiffened. She said they were just friends. I laughed, cold and low. Is that what she calls it? I ordered 2 shots. Then 4. The alcohol burned away my guilt. Jake's hand brushed mine as he reached for his glass. He pulled back, but not fast enough. I saw the crack in his resolve. We left together. His truck smelled like pine and regret. The heat between us was not warmth. It was a wildfire, reckless and destructive. Jake's hands trembled as he fumbled with the keys, his breath sharp with whiskey and shame. I did not wait for an invitation. I climbed onto his lap in the cramped back seat, my fingers clawing at his shirt like I could peel away the layers of his loyalty to her. His wedding band dug into my hip as he gripped me, his mouth crashing against mine with a hunger that felt more like punishment than passion. It was not tenderness. It was teeth and nails and choked breaths. The seats creaked under our weight, the cold leather biting into my skin. Jake muttered Sam's name once, a broken whisper, before I silenced him with my hands, with my body, with every ounce of rage I had stored since finding those texts. He did not look at me. I did not look at him. We were not people. We were weapons, each trying to destroy what the other had left to lose. Afterward, he wept into his hands, his shoulders heaving. She will never forgive me. I stared past him at the frost on the windshield, my chest hollow. Now you know how it feels. The next morning, I found a note on my kitchen counter. This was a mistake.
Do not contact me.
But it was too late. I had crossed a line, and the guilt began to fester. 2 days later, my father showed up at my door, his face gaunt. "Sam is pregnant," he said. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The truth about love is this: it cannot fix what is already broken. Sam's pregnancy felt like a fist around my throat. My father stood in my doorway, his shoulders slumped, waiting for me to speak. But I had no words left for him. I closed the door softly, my hands steady for the first time in months. That night, I drove to Jake's house. His truck was gone, but his porch light glowed. I left a letter in his mailbox, a confession, an apology, a plea. "I used you to hurt Sam. I am sorry. You deserve better." I did not sign my name. Some wounds need no signature. The next morning, I packed my mother's quilt, her journals, and a single photo of our family, taken before the sickness, before the lies. I left the keys to her house on the kitchen counter. My father could keep the walls, I would keep the memories. At the cemetery, snow dusted my mother's grave. I traced her name in the ice. "I am sorry I let them tarnish you," I whispered. "I am sorry I became like them." The wind sighed, carrying no answers. Months later, I received a postcard from Sam. No return address. "It is a girl. We named her Clara after your mom." I burned it in the sink, watching the edges curl to ash. Some ghosts are better left unspoken. Now, I live in a small apartment near Lake Michigan. The water is gray and restless, like grief. Some days, I still taste the bitterness of betrayal. But I plant flowers on my windowsill, marigolds, my mother's favorite. They bloom stubbornly, defiantly, as if to say, life goes on, even when love does not. And that, my dear friends, is where our story ends. Or perhaps where a new one begins. To every viewer who stayed until this point, thank you. Your support means the world. If this story moved you, please let me know in the comments. What would you have done in Laura's place? Could you forgive? Could you forget? Share your thoughts, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more raw, emotional journeys like this one. To those who have not yet subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit that button and join our growing family. Your support fuels these stories, and I cannot wait to hear from you. Until next time, remember, even in the darkest storms, there is light ahead. You just have to keep walking.